Hey there, and welcome back to part 3 of Falling and Bucking Endorsement Explained. Where we left off on part 1 was on emergency response procedures, and we're now moving into situational awareness, which is a huge part and an ongoing theme throughout the practical component of the BC Faller Training Standard. And this is one issue in particular that arborists have struggled with in the exam. The situational awareness piece really ties into a world that is rooted around commercial falling procedures and the tools that they would typically be using, maybe fairly foreign to arborists. In these conditions, as an arborist, it may seem reasonable to respond to some of these falling difficulties with climbing gear and with ropes and rigging, and unfortunately that is not going to be even entertained as part of this testing. Pretty much everything that is going to happen as part of this test needs to be done using a combination of hazard assessment, work planning, with the use of a falling saw, wedges, and an axe. And if you can't hack it, you can pack it. So one of the problems arborists coming into this environment face is the key component being how to manage oneself safely, working independently, and recognizing the multitude of factors and hazards that exist in a stand of timber. Overhead hazards, snags, danger trees, and so on. So without having that mentoring behind you coming into this environment for your very first time under the pressures of an exam can be pretty mentally demanding. And many arborists, as I say, don't even have an opportunity to fire up the saw because they haven't given the impression that they're prepared for the work in that sort of environment to the QST or the evaluator. So how do you prepare for that? Parts 11 through 16 really hinge, no pun intended, on the access to a mentor. And I'm not talking about someone who's a veteran on your crew but is unqualified. In this case, old school is no school. If you're not up to speed on the content of this exam that is layered in behind this slide, if you're not prepared for that, you're going home. You can rest assured of that. So finding access to those mentors, they are out there. There is a small pool of endorsed fallers in the province that are willing to work to get candidates up to speed and ready. You can reach out to the community. You can reach out to me, certainly, and I can hopefully connect you with endorsed fallers that are in the system that might be able to assist getting you up to speed, even if it's just over the phone, checking what steps you've been through so far and making suggestions and recommendations of who you can access for further training. That would be a first step. Looking at the exam itself, you're going to want to review the exam over and over again. Start going through the scenarios and start at the acceptable level. Before you're reaching for excellent, you really want to be able to nail the acceptable standard 10 times out of 10. Prepare under pressure is one friend of mine, an old co-worker, used to always say, if it's not raining, it's not training. And you don't want to be working with somebody who's just bobbing their head and not giving critical feedback and constructive criticism. Use video as a tool, for example, and really analyze because you're going to see habits that have formed. You're going to see areas for improvement, and that's what you want to work on. Some old military jargon here: smooth is fast. Speed is not wanted in this process. The exam's going to take some time. It's not a rush job. They want to see you're methodical. You work well under pressure, and you avoid mistakes. So slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You got to develop an understanding of those safe work procedures, so don't shy away from the info flips. If you have questions about some of the jargon in there, you're again going to want to reach out to your mentor. Make a list of notes of whatever you don't understand necessarily, or it may not be perfectly clear, and run that by somebody in the know, because it more than likely will come up in some capacity in the exam. The exam's based largely around these safe work procedures in the info flip, so you got to know it. The answers are all there for the most part. It may be cryptic because it is jargon related to forestry. There's some different terms for similar tasks that we would use in urban tree care, but you'll have to get to the bottom of that. There are special falling procedures as well you're going to need to become familiar with. Overcoming falling difficulties, summoning assistance, all these sorts of situations, you're going to want to know inside and out, because those questions will come about. And then some variances as well when you get into technical challenges. Again, you're in an environment, you're entering an environment you've never been in, and in many cases you've probably at the task level faced a similar challenge, but it may not directly apply to a forestry perspective. So it's good having somebody who's been through that process and understands it to bounce those questions off of. And a good mentor is really going to put you through your paces and make sure that you're up to speed on those things. So going through a review of preparation steps. We've done the references, we've got some practice behind us, hopefully guided by a mentor who's qualified. Go through a mock exam. That's probably the most important step, just to stratify all of your learning up to that point and build your confidence ahead of the exam, is just have someone qualified put themselves in the position of a mock evaluator and run you through your paces and ask those tough questions and take you through all the scenarios just to see that you're ready. And you'll see it takes quite a bit of time, particularly if stumps are being scored as you go through this process. Speaking for the evaluators of this test, it's an enormous amount of content to get through, and the evaluator will be just rushing like mad to keep tabs on everything that's happening, because there's skills you're demonstrating that they don't sequence themselves necessarily through the exam, so they'll be bouncing back and forth between pages and making lots of notes and taking photos. It's pretty full on, so you can only go so fast anyways without getting ahead of your evaluator, and they'll slow you down if needed. So the tools for the test. This would be a good frame to grab for all the items you're going to need to have on hand to show up for challenge, or even just for practice. This is kind of the minimum kit you should have. You're going to need your truck with a pre-trip complete. You're going to need 2 suitable chainsaws. And what's a suitable chainsaw? It's got to have an appropriate bar size for the timber you're going to be working with. It's got to have a full wrap handlebar on it. It needs to have all safety features. It needs to be in good running condition. You are going to want to have your chainsaw toolkit, so a scrunch or bar wrench, extra chain, extra bar, files, round and flat files, a raker gauge you got to have. You got to have 2 approved axes. What those axes are spelled out clearly in the standard. It's minimum 17-inch handle, I think maximum 27-inch, 3.5 pound pinned head with yellow marking on the handle. You're going to need 5 suitable wedges for the timber you're working in good condition, and you got to show that you're able to maintain your wedges. So if you got chunks out of them and you're not sanding them back into working condition and sanding off burrs, then this is one of those things. You show up with a bunch of new gear, and the evaluator is going to be immediately suspicious. They want to see gear that's been worked and maintained. That's a key part of this, is showing that whole side of it. You're going to need your fuel and oil in a portable container. Be aware you're going to be packing in most of your supplies, so you're going to want containers that are suitable for that. Don't bring out a 50-liter can, and you'll be in for a world of hurt. You'll need a fire extinguisher, an OFA level 1 first aid kit, pressure bandages on yourself, preferably one of the small belt first aid kits. You probably want a wedge belt with you. Make sure you're not hanging an axe unprotected. You're going to need either a sheath on your axe if you're hanging it off your belt, or one of the aluminum caddies. You'll need a peelless whistle secured within no hand reach. Basically, you twist your head and be able to get to your whistle. PPE, you're going to need corked footwear. Don't show up without it. So either, and they don't require steel toes in the falling world. You will require a mountaineering type boot or a high ankled work boot, and they will need to be corked. You can wear high rubber corks as well. You need leg, head, face, eye, ear, hand protection, a high-vis outer layer, so it'll be yellow or orange is acceptable. Your hard hat has to be yellow or orange as well. You'll have to have your qualifying credentials, your ITA arborist technician or your WUAA certified utility arborist. And you'll have to have current occupational first aid, level 1 is minimum. Bring some survey tape. Make sure your emergency response plan and job planning forms are with you on hand. A pencil and a pen, and definitely water and food. Stump scoring. This is a really good skill to get in the habit of. If you're measuring your own results, practicing with a mentor. So I've broken it down. This would be another good slide for you to grab. It breaks it down into pieces here for you. D diameter, BC back cut length, UC is the undercut length, UC percent is the undercut divided by diameter as a percentage. The undercut opening, low side step height, that's the height of your back cut, high side. So they're looking for a level back cut, and we're measuring the difference between these two. The scenario is the scenario relating to the falling exam. So for example, a wedge tree or a heavy back leaner or a dangerous tree or short stubby and so on. The name and date of the faller, score using part 19A of the faller's examination. So it's in the back of the exam for producing the score of that scenario. So we can see this faller had a wedge tree scenario. Generally, it's a good idea using your marker or a lumber crayon just to mark wherever the wedge was placed. You can see they're pretty level on their back cut. We've got 1.5 inches and 1.25 inches here, so that's in the ballpark for this diameter of a tree. It's a 27-inch diameter. Looking at the table for the appropriate back cut heights, which you'll find in the info flips, you would get that information. So 21-inch back cut, undercut is 6-inch depth. That's a 22% depth undercut. So it's hits the mark and scored a 12 ultimately. So good work.